we have an itch. Hi y'all, and welcome back to my channel. And we have the typical whatever, not so much a disclaimer, but if my lighting goes in and out, it is heckin' overcast outside, so that tends to affect the lighting situation. And if it looks like I am profusely sweating, it's because I am. But today we are reviewing the Melt Cosmetics 420 palette. I remember when their first smoke sessions came out and mom was like, what, why are they doing this whole theme thing? And I was like, well, they're based in California. And both my mom and her sister, my aunt who lives in California, were like, oh, okay. So here we have this palette. I admit I was kind of, backwards. I was a little bit shooketh when I opened it out because the colors and the cool little changing shiftiness. I know this is based on a specific strain, like a really intense strain of what can I say without being demonetized? Y'all know what this is based on. It's based on one of them strains. And I will admit, when I saw it teased, y'all would have seen my struggle on Snapchat and Twitter when I tried to get it first, but that was apparently just the stash box, which had the palette and the pipes and everything like that. That was a no-go. I didn't realize that they were going to be selling it later just on its own because I didn't really want the whateverness. I wanted the palette to review, and if that was the only way I was going to be able to get it, then that's what I was going to do. But they did release it, and like I said, I will admit, seeing pictures of it, I was like, yeah, sure, I want to review that, but pictures, the online pictures of this, what they showed Trend Mood and stuff like that, does not do this color story justice. It is so much more beautiful in person. It's much more rich and vibrant, and it seems like a much more unique color story in person. But here we have the beautiful bad boy right here. I mean, come on, this is my shiz. These are my colors. You all know I am not a typical neutral person, but I can get down with neutrals that can go alternative, and Melt Cosmetics does that whole neutral with an edge really, really well. I mean, basically Melt Cosmetics is what Urban Decay wishes it could be. And so here we have this beauteous palette. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 shades. This shit is gonna run you $58, which is pretty pricey for grammage and whatever. I know that you get a lot of product in the pans, and when Melt Cosmetics does their formula right, I recommend them above Huda Beauty. I definitely recommend them above Too Faced, Urban Decay, Tarte, Lorac, kind of that whole regular, normal, typical, the sort of standard companies that, we buy from. I'm unsure if this palette is limited edition or gonna come to Sephora. I think I had one of y'all tell me that it was limited edition and only gonna be on the Melt Cosmetics site, which I think is kind of stupid because this is a really pretty palette, and spoiler alert, the quality is really nice. So I'll be pretty surprised if they end up not putting this on Sephora just because it's so beautiful. The matte to shimmer ratio is basically perfection for me. You get one shimmer because y'all know your girl loves a good matte palette. Obviously, it is what I am wearing on my high times eyes today. I started off with hash right here, and then I went into full melt, and then we finished it up with roll it right here. And then for the shimmer on my eyes, I went into my ColourPop Brown Sugar palette because, like I said, this one only has one shimmer, which is this bright golden shade here. But honestly, enough talk about that. Let's get into swatching these bad boys and talking about the palette on a whole. We're gonna start up here with Shotgun, and there apparently was a lot of talk of Shotgun and Wax being very similar. Obviously, you can tell this is a lime yellow bordering on green, where this is a true daffodil dandelion yellow. Then we have Faded, which is this beautiful beautiful. Oh my goodness, it matches my hair. And then Chronic, and I will say this Chronic shade in the pigmentation department, it does not come to play. So here we have, oh my stars. Oh, those swatched like heaven. I mean, on those top two shades, do you see that opacity going on? That is just stunning. Okay, so I had paused myself filming because I am a blithering moron. But here we have the bottom three there from top to bottom is Roll It, Dank, and Blunt. And I was just sort of reiterating the fact that I'm not I can't tell you how many times I've said it. If I said it once, I'll say it a billion times. I'm not a typical neutral palette lover, so y'all would have seen in my eyeshadow palette declutter, I decluttered like my Naked palettes, I think one of my Tartelette palettes, I've already decluttered my Too Faced chocolate bars, because I like neutrals that skew a little bit less, you know, you can grunge it up, you can make it look more alternative. And so between having this palette, Gemini, the Rust palette, 27, basically the Melt Cosmetics neutral palettes are my go-to. And those look so stinking. I mean, those top two shades are just delicious. Next up, we have Shatter. Now, I will admit, out of all the shades in this, Shatter, which is funny because it's the shimmer shade, and y'all know how I feel about, you know, mattes over shimmers. It's like, really, I know that Melt Cosmetics shimmers tend to be a wee bit chunky typically, and like, you have to find a very specific sort of brush to use with them. I found that something a little bit denser, a little bit harder for you to really pick up that shadow works pretty well with these, but I found that this one was pretty chunky and kind of, you had to work with it a fair amount, and it kind of, like I said, it chunked out a bit on the eye. It's just not as full wham bam in your face as some of their other shimmers, like from the Smoke Sessions palette, or what you're finding in the Gemini, in the 27, in the Rust. So I wasn't a huge fan of this one. I wish it had been more like their typical shimmer formula. So a little bit smoother, a little less chunky, a bit easier to work with, but it's a really pretty stinking gold. Then we have Wax right here, which, oh my goodness, Teresa, if you be watching this and you be wanting whatever yellow, this is amazing. Then Full Melt, which is also pretty. And then Hash, which is kind of like, I would say, a cooler tone, deeper version of the like Buon Fresco that we see in every other Anastasia palette. Then we got these bad boys. Oh, look at that. Look! I used to say that the yellow from the Colored Rain palette was like the best yellow I'd ever used. This is the new best yellow I've ever used. Then going on here and here. I'm pretty sure I said it in my Rust palette review, and I will leave that down below if you haven't seen it, but this right here is like what swatch dreams are made of. Like, if you're an Instagram account that does like bomb diggity swatches, this is absolute perfection. I mean, they just go on so smooth, so pigmented, so beautiful. I mean, that is just that yes, I live for this. As well as the color story, which is absolutely stunning. So obviously, if y'all hadn't guessed it from the swatch session, this is beautiful. This sort of quality, aside from that shimmer, I wish they, like I said, made it like one of their other typical shimmers. I'm not sure what they're doing in the sense of, I hate it. And we've seen this from like Anastasia, whatever, when they have a bomb diggity shimmer formula, but when they're bouncing between palettes, they're like bouncing between formulas. I'm just like, you've got something that works, keep to that. And let's just, you know, I don't know why they switch it up. Maybe they don't switch it up and I'm just bad. Maybe I just suck at makeup. But I feel like when you've got something that's so good in the other palettes that you have that are in this format, why are we switching up a formula? Just keep it like it is. Keep it pushing. Because the shimmers in the Rust palette are heckin' pigmented and bomb diggity. And I don't know if you can tell, like there's the shimmers there. You probably can't tell, but it's just chunkier. It just isn't as smooth. Please don't be broken. Okay, we're good. But it's just not as smooth, not as initially pigmented. You know, it's just kind of a you know, you gotta work with it a bit more. You gotta dig all up in there. I just wasn't impressed with the quality of the shimmer in this palette compared to whatever shimmers they formulated and put in their other palettes in the past. Now that being said, y'all know, shimmer aside, that mattes, for me, build the backbone of a palette. And this palette has a really good backbone. I mean, the shades, they are beautifully pigmented. They blend really nice together. There's just when Melt does its formula right, they do it right. And this is absolutely stunning quality wise. Even, you know, this shimmer aside, just this palette on a whole without that, absolutely stunning. I love it when Melt manages to hit it out of the park, like the Rust palette, you know, everything besides that Millenial Pinkz catastrophe. How you say that? I think that's how you say that. But this is just so lovely. Y'all know I love yellows. I love greens. I love a really grungy palette. And this is so good. Highly recommend if you are interested in this. I can stand by the quality, especially of the mattes. And I love the fact that this is like such a beautifully curated, cool toned palette, because y'all know your girl isn't a huge cool tone person, but I've honestly been getting into those cool tones. Which palette? I can't remember which palette it was, but there was one palette where I was like, I'm not really a cool tone person. And then I used it and I was like, maybe I am a cool tone person. But this is basically, you know, if I were to recommend or use a cool tone palette, it would be this. Bright colors are amazing. The neutrals are gorgeous. The only downside is this shimmer. But for the quality and the beauty, the blendability, the pigmentation does have fallout. I will say that this one, and this one are the biggest offenders when it comes to fallout. But if you are used to the typical Melt formula, they've got fallout. It isn't anything more or less than what we're used to. But one thing that's kind of important, I wanted to do and show you guys how this palette compares in color story to these, because a lot of people feel like this palette is sort of a mashup, and Melt does kind of have the most like different than what they typically do is the Amor Eterno collection, which you had the one vivid one and then you had the one like blue reddy vampy one. But here we have the 420 going on here. Let me show you their other most recent palette, which is the Rust palette, which I love. So here we have those two going here. I mean, you are going to have some natural overlap because there's only so many ways you can do brown, you know, but this one is obviously just a little bit more like almost red, like terracotta toned. You got that really nice peachy shade here on this end, but you do get kind of like that orangey, grungy, you know, that sort of thing. I do think it is different. There are some similarities. Like I said, you are going to see some natural overlap because Melt kind of does this thing where they have like one side of a color store where it's like green or yellow, and then they mix it up with like neutrals that are toned in that way to companion with those non-neutral colors. Then we have the Gemini right here, which probably, I don't know if it has the most overlap, but you can see there's some similarities in the green, there's some similarities in the browns and those colors. One thing that I do love about the 420 palette and most of Melt's palette is they don't include like a really pasty setting shade. Y'all know how I feel about that. I like a palette that gives me all color. Boom. And the majority of the melt palettes definitely do that. But here we have that going on there. Obviously, some similar overlap. Then last but not least is the 27 palette, which is the most different. You're not going to see a huge amount of overlap in the 27 because the 27 is very red based. It's also much more warm. So a lot of these standard neutrals you're going to get in here aren't going to be the same as the ones in 420 or even Gemini. So obviously take that into consideration, thinking about what palettes you have in your collection. I know a lot of people don't like including a lot of overlap, but if you are someone who really, really likes the Melt Cosmetics formula like I do, I would highly recommend picking this up. I think compared to a lot of other palettes on the market, that's one thing I really like about Melt Cosmetics is they still manage to provide something that's unique while still being wearable. Because you've got, you know, the yellow and the green and the whatever, but then you've got the beautiful neutral tones. This is absolutely stunning. I just absolutely love this formula. Was super just all around pleased with this palette. I know it's something that I'm going to be reaching for. Spoiler alert, this and the Rust palette are already slated for like my best makeup of 2020. So if they just keep on pushing it with this format, this formula, except for that shimmer, I will be very, very happy. Do not go back to the Millenial Pinkz, please. That was maybe a bad fever dream. I like to think that it didn't actually happen. But there we have it for that review for you all. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that it was informative. I know a lot of you have said that you're planning on getting it, you're thinking about getting it, you've got it. Definitely let me know y'all's opinions down below. I know for a lot of y'all that got it on the first initial launch, you were all like, I have it, I love it. And now I have it and I love it. But let us know down below what you think. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love you. And as always, keep it real. Mwah!